Well, welcome everybody. The clock isn't working, but I can see on the computer that it is 7 o'clock, so if you would please join me in the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. For the record, all council are present, and as is the staff. Under the consent agenda, we have items A through J.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to accept consent calendar items A through J.
Okay, a motion was made by Councilman Lemley and seconded by Councilman Owen to accept consent calendar items A through J. Is there any discussion?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Carries unanimously. So we're to the public comment period. I guess before I go through the instructions, maybe I should ask if anyone is interested in public comment period tonight. Yes, we have yes. So public comment will be opened. You're allowed 3 minutes. Please state your name and address for the record. And you're up, Mary.
Good evening. My name is Mary Anderson, and I live at 928 Beachley Road here in Sedro-Woolley. Washington became a state on November 11th, 1889, and a week later had a governor. Shortly after that, in fact, one of the first departments to be established in our great state was the library system. Libraries were so important to the new state that they were set up to be under the jurisdiction of library boards, independent of local politics and local politicians. Library boards could be appointed by local politicians, but were not answerable to them. Libraries were so critical to and valued by Washington State because before the internet, before television, before even radio, libraries were the primary source of reliable information for the people. That's why the state made provision for library boards to be untrammeled, untainted, and unfettered by local politicians and petty politics. An unusual situation regarding the Sedro-Woolley City Library will shortly come before you. 2 longtime board members will be retiring in December of this year, and the mayor will be making appointments to replace them. It is important that these appointees be regular and consistent current library users, for it would be unconscionable for people who do not use the library to be those controlling its fate. That is true for any library, anywhere. Furthermore, although the mayor appoints library board members, any mayor anywhere should not, and in fact does not, have jurisdiction over either a library or its board. Please exercise care and wisdom when approving or disapproving this mayor's appointees. The constituents you represent are trusting in you to approve appointees who put their library and their fellow citizens above political considerations. Thank you for listening, and I wish you all a very happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Dennis? So Dennis, last time you gave public comment, you did not obey the rules, so if you're going to speak tonight, remember, you're speaking to the council, not to the audience.
Actually, that was 2 or 3 sessions ago, but okay.
I think it was the last time you gave public comment.
I guess we'll just have to subpoena those records. Just kidding. Okay, yeah, I remember that. Dennis O'Neill. I reside at 109 Talcott Street in Sedro-Woolley. And just a couple questions on the frequently asked questions, answers here that you provided, Mayor. If the voters approve annexation of our library, I was wondering, obviously the voters are going to have to approve annexation, so when would this take place, the voters approving it or disapproving it? And when would we find some information as to what's going on between the district and the city? And I guess that there was a meeting on Friday morning, that dealt with that, and I was just sort of curious about how many city councilmen were there, and I probably won't get a show of hands. But anybody want to raise their hand? How many people were there? Okay. Well, how many people have read it? You?
I have a day job.
All right. We had the city did, Mayor, that they had that $25,000 architect drawing of what we could do with a new library if the city did it themselves. I think that was the point of it. I'm not sure. But I was wondering if that had ever been done. And if not, since it seems like eventually someday here we'll get that consolidation through, I would like to suggest that we give somewhat of a year-end bonus if possible. The police department has had to put up with a lot less people than they probably should have, or no salary increases for quite a while, I believe, and or regular city employees. I think it would go a long way towards helping them out, because I'm sure they haven't had any increases in salary or anything for quite some time, with the lid on everything pretty much. And I was also wondering if, Aaron there ran for, congratulations on your PED, but I was wondering if that's something that most employees can do. Do they have to individually request variance so that they could also get a second job? I mean, it's not my business, I guess, but I know a lot of them are probably pretty tight, and they've got some experience levels. And can they also represent something other than the city? I think it would be appropriate if we didn't, if the city didn't directly say, no, you can't go help another entity out on a part-time basis. But if it doesn't affect your performance here, yeah, we'll look at it. We'll let it go. I think it'd be a nice thing if we're going to create policy, and Aaron's certainly qualified to work on the PUD. I understand that, and I think it'd be nice if other people also had the ability or the right to also expect that same level of consideration. That's it for me.
Thank you, Dennis.
You bet. Thank you.
Anybody else tonight? Yes, sir.
Tim Holland, 200 Murdoch Street, just behind here, and I talked about stormwater last time, and Aaron mentioned that a lot of people don't derive any direct benefit from the stormwater tax, and I gotta say that's a valid point. Thinking about it, I don't really want the city to get flooded. Even though I may not contribute a lot to it, I still derive benefit from an unflooded city. So yeah, paying a tax on that, I see that as a valid thing. I would still like to have some consideration, since, like in my case, I spent a lot of money to try to prevent any kind of runoff from the property. I don't know how you're going to work that out, but if there would be some consideration for the kind of investment that the businesses have made, if there are any others, and that will make in the future if they come on in and have to put in that kind of system. So that was all I had to say. Thank you for doing your job. Happy Thanksgiving. I'm glad you're up there and I'm not.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Move to the city, Tim.
Anybody else? Okay, I will now close the public comment period, and we'll go to public hearing with reference to the 2017 balanced budget ordinance, which is a second reading on pages 57 through 66. So let me see. So I'll open the public hearing at 7:10. If anybody cares to come forward and testify on the budget. Mr. O'Neill.
Dennis O'Neill, 109 Talcott Street, Sedro-Woolley. And I just had a question on this. I think everybody was sort of surprised. I'm sure the city wasn't, but I was sort of surprised when Mike and Sons folded their tent and True Value, because of the death of one of the founders, the local founder here, also closed up as of December 3rd. And I was hoping that the revenue that's projected on that budget doesn't include money from those two sources, because you're immediately starting with an imbalance, and I know that mid-year or even sooner you have to go back and do a correction and shuffle things around a little bit sometimes, but it's sort of silly to run into that right away and not be able to go in there and tweak that budget to account for the lost revenue from Mike and Sons and from True Value. So I'm just suggesting that you try to make it as close as possible so it's easy to figure out the changes when they come about and why they did and that sort of thing 2 years down the road when somebody's standing up here wondering what happened, or a year or 6 months. That's the only suggestion I have. Otherwise, I don't think anybody out here knows what the budget looks like yet. You haven't really discussed it much, I don't believe. I don't know, maybe you have.
There are copies of the budget both online, in here at the counter and at the library.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else for the public hearing on the budget? Okay, at this time, at 7:12, I will close the public hearing. Now, typically, council, we would vote on the budget right away. However, in this case, we have unfinished business under items 6A through C and 7. The budget was created with those elements incorporated into it. So I will move the vote on the budget to item 8 until we get through items 6 and 7. Otherwise, I would be ahead of myself to ask for your approval on a budget since those elements were used to develop it.
Mr. Mayor, just a point of clarification. It does not include, the budget does not include item 7?
No, the budget does include items 6A through C and item 7.
Oh, okay.
So, moving on to unfinished business, item 6, this is a second reading, pages 67 to 78. And is this you, Patsy? Aaron.
So backing up just a step, the budget was presented in great detail, Dennis, at the work session and then also at the last meeting. So that's been discussed. These items were part of the budget actually in both those presentations, and the council discussed these in significant detail at the last meeting and held public hearings on all 3 of these ordinances, 6A, B, and C. So I'm happy to go through them if you'd like in more detail. However, nothing has changed between last meeting and this meeting. So unless there are questions, I believe these are ready for council deliberation and possible action.
So with respect to the next ordinance number, which should be 1860 Tax 16, the first requested motion is on page 69 of your packet. I am. What's your pleasure, council? It's item A is the topic of the next ordinance, which would increase the sewer rates by the cost of living adjustment, 1.78%.
The recommendations are on page 68, I believe, and there are 3 separate motions, one for each ordinance.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adopt attached ordinance increasing the sewer rate by 1.78%.
Okay, motion was made by Councilman Sandstrom. That would be ordinance number 1860, tax 16. Is that your motion, to approve 1860, tax 16?
Yes.
Second.
Okay, the motion was made by Councilman Sandstrom, second by Councilman Cornegy, to approve ordinance 1860, tax 16, an ordinance increasing sewer water rates by the cost of living 1.78%. Any discussion?
I believe the reason why we're doing it through the CPI, and when we originally started doing this, is because to incrementally do increases instead of playing catch up and doing one large increase. I think generally people can pay a few cents more on a bill instead of having to pay a whole dollar or more on a bill. And so these small increases were a way to, over time, gradually, instead of having a steep jump in rate payment. So I think that's what you see here tonight.
I might mention that this rate increase does not affect those who are the senior, disabled, low-income, qualified customers of our utility. They have not experienced a rate increase in at least 5 or more years. So,
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
Okay. Councilman Kinzer stands opposed, and ordinance passes. Item B, the ordinance increasing solid waste recycling by the same amount, cost of living allowance, plus specific increases to specific services, which were the rate that the tires and some, I think, refrigerators and some other pieces have gone up, so we have to keep up with the cost of that.
Tires, computers, TVs, freezers.
Right, it's the rate that we're charged to get rid of those things.
it's tires, refrigerators, freezers, and wood waste. E-waste, TVs, and the like, we continue to take for free.
Wood waste? What do you mean by it? I mean, like...
Okay, so if we take, it's not the yard waste in particular, but it's wood waste that we take down at the center. It just costs us more to get rid of it. So same with the tires and refrigerators and freezers, we have an increase in the cost of getting the Freon removed.
However, if it's over 10 years old, Puget Sound Energy will take it off your hands as long as it's operating.
Yeah, not from us, I don't think, but if the homeowner calls, I guess that would be good information for us to link to our solid waste website.
Yes. I've got two.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adopt ordinance 1861, tax 16, a motion to increase solid waste utility waste by 1.8% plus minor increases for tires, refrigerators, wood byproducts for those specific services.
The motion was made by Councilman Lemley and seconded by Councilman Owen to approve ordinance 1861, tax 16, an ordinance increasing solid waste recycling by 1.78% plus minor increases to specified services. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Carries unanimously. Okay, item C is would be 1862-16, an ordinance increasing the stormwater rates by the cost of living plus a $2 per ERU.
I make a motion to adopt attached ordinance increasing stormwater rates by 1.78% plus $2 per ERU, as at 1862-16.
I have a motion by...
I'll second. Oh, did you say?
I have a second. Thank you, Judy. Motion was made by Councilman Cornegay, seconded by Councilman Johnson to approve Ordinance 1862-16, an ordinance increasing stormwater rates by 1.78% plus $2 per ERU. Any further discussion?
What, again, the ERU, is that like a one of those auxiliary dwellings, or what is
It's
that?
essentially a residential equivalent measurement. So for stormwater, the whole rate structure is built around an assumed residential unit. So a house with its rooftops and gutters, driveway, etc. And then where that's important is when it's scaled out to somebody who owns like an acre of parking lot or something of that nature. So there's a formula built in here that allows that house to be converted to something with more impervious surface, so there's a quality. And then there's also a way to look at areas that are undisturbed or in their natural state, so they are in a different class as well. So it's an equivalent residential unit.
Okay. $2.
My building, my parking.
Any other discussion or questions?
ERU.
No, that's fine. That's what this time is for, discussion. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Opposed.
But just telling Brent, I don't like it, but yes, I agree with it. But
Okay. The vote carries. Councilman Kinzer is opposed, for the record. Okay, paragraph 7, utility tax on domestic water ordinance. This is a second reading. It's on page 79 through 82 in your packet. And I'm catching up here. Okay, and this is Aaron.
So just like the other items, this is a second reading. The first reading and public hearing were held at the November 9th meeting, and no changes or updates have been made to this ordinance. What this ordinance would do is increase the effective rate of the tax to 6%, which was the council's original intent in 2014. The reason we don't currently collect 6% is because the law allows the water utility to deduct from their gross sales the proportion of their water that is attributed to fire or like fire flow, essentially. So the result has been our city's 6% tax is about a 4.8% tax effective rate. So this ordinance would increase the I'll just call it the gross rate to result in an effective rate of 6%. All of the dollars from this tax are currently restricted into the City Council Strategic Reserve Fund, which to date has been used to make advance payments on debt service and is available for essentially council-authorized uses, infrastructure investment, and ultimately what the City Council decides. So it's not generally available to be spent for any city service outside of specific council authorization.
Thank you. Any questions from council? That would be Ordinance 1863-16. Motion is on page 80. Oh, is it the bottom of 79?
Yeah.
Stand corrected.
I make a motion that 1863-16 be adopted to adopt the attached ordinance increasing the city's utility tax rates on water.
Second.
Motion was made by Councilman Johnson, seconded by Councilman Cornegay to adopt Ordinance 1863-16, adopting a utility tax on domestic water. Any discussion?
I know that this is in the budget, but using this to pay down debt or saving for another time, as council directs, if you pay $80 or if you pay $100, I believe you're still ahead. This is the second time we've looked at this, and we're using the 80% of what we estimated we're going to get to our advantage. I think going back and asking for more or going to do this a second time is kind of hard to ask. So, my thoughts.
Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
So now I'm lost. How many were opposed? Please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. The nays have it. Did you catch those, Cheryl? Very good. Okay.
So on the budget item then, if the council's ready to take action, it would be a motion to adopt the budget as presented with reductions in revenue and expenditures as a result of not increasing the utility tax. And that would be pretty easy to track because it really only affects a couple of line items.
Okay, so as I explained before, we'll bring the budget up as item 8. And that's back on page 57 to 66. So I'm looking for a motion to approve the budget. That would be, I don't see the motion. Which page is that on?
It's on page
It's
57.
Lost myself.
57, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, that would be ordinance 1860.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
I didn't get it either. 1864, tax 16.
And I also move.
Are we on 8?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Mr. Mayor?
The motion was made by Councilman Judith Dunley.
Is this for the ordinance or the budget?
This is the budget.
Second.
Okay, motion was made by Councilman Judith Dunley, seconded by Councilman Cornegy to approve ordinance 1864-16, the budget minus expendables and expenditures that are a result of the failure of the utility tax on domestic water. Does that capture it? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? And the budget is passed unanimously. Thank you, Council. Committee reports. Starting with Chief Tucker. Welcome back from vacation.
All right. Thank you. I'm trying to get caught up on the inundation of email while I was gone, but just an update. We're starting a Reserve Academy at Skagit Valley College in, I think it's in next week, the end of next week. Sergeant Harris is going to be in charge of the Reserve Academy. We've got 2 candidates coming up that we're still getting the final background checks on them. One's a gal who was worked as some employee for the RCMP and just became a naturalized citizen, so we're looking at her as one of our candidates. And the other is a young man who I think's been taking some classes at Skagit, but it's a Spanish speaker, which will really help our guys on the road with an extra Spanish speaker. They'll be doing their training for about 6 months, one night a week and on Saturdays, and they're paying for their own training. All we're going to have to do is outfit them when they get done. So minimal cost, adding a couple more bodies on the road, and reserves tend to come and help us when we're busiest. So a real plus for us for a minimal amount of outlay. Both of our investigators are still tied up on the Puget Street shooting. They've been working on that. We had 2 different shootings in the last month and a half, and they've been tied up on both of those, but one of those has pretty much resolved itself, and the other one is we're still doing some investigation. We're hoping to get a little better idea of who did what sometime next week. We got some other interviews scheduled for that. Dennis had brought up the Mike & Sons leaving. We're fielding some complaints on that. People had vehicles there, and now Mike & Sons is gone. For now, that's still all a civil matter. But once we get a little better idea of what all is going on and what people are missing and how that transpired, we may have something further to go on. But for the most part, everything's looking like it's a civil issue with the business that collapsed or went away. And you may have seen in the paper there was a big training exercise at Skagit Valley College this last Saturday. It was an active shooter training. We're working on integrating the police, fire, paramedics, hospital, everybody involved in the active shooter response, and kind of changing the way we do business, trying to get the police escorting people to assess injured and get them into medical care faster. So it's going to be something that we're going to be focusing on in 2017. Every officer in Skagit County is going to be slated for getting active shooter response training in 2017, and this will be part of that same type of training. This is a pretty big endeavor carried out by a lot of the fire service were the folks that kept this going. For those of you that don't know, we've had some issues with our Department of Emergency Management. They've had a serious turnover at their upper levels. The people that were there before were really making this happen, and now the new folks aren't quite ready to take on that burden yet. So we're going to look at 2017, what's our best option on how to work on a higher level than just our local resources. We are needing something like an emergency management. That those folks are invaluable, especially seeing the kind of response we got at the mall shooting. That was 200 officers from 20 or 30 different agencies. We need an umbrella like our Department of Emergency Management to manage that. So we're going to be working with them to see if they can pick up the burden, or if we're going to have to do something different and make some plans for the future. So we got a lot of stuff going on in 2017, and a lot of it's going to be, a lot of our training is going to be focused on that kind of response. And the Christmas parade's coming up on the 3rd, so if you aren't planning on anything on the night of the 3rd, come watch the parade. Parade capital of the world. That's all I got.
Thank you, Chief. And for the non-Canadians, RCMP is?
We're all Canadian Mounted Police.
Thank you. All right, Todd.
Yes, we just put on 2 volunteers ourselves. They'll be going through training. Both of them live fairly close, one on Trail Road and one right across the street over on Murdoch Court over here. They'll be starting training probably next month, two nights a week in a Saturday, so they'll probably be done in about 4 months. So it's good to get, these are for outside positions. We have 2 firefighters residents that are going to be moving out in January. So one's going into the Army, and one is heading down south to do some additional military training, I do believe. So for reserves. And so we have a couple people lined up to replace their positions while they're serving our country. We also participated in the mass shooting at the college, our personnel, and of course we drilled with the Sedro-Woolley PD and the county last year. We did shooting at Cascade Middle School, and it was very similar to what they did Saturday. So. Let's see here. Chief Klinger will be back on Monday, light duty, so it'll be good for him to take back some of his paperwork responsibilities. So I think that's about it.
Thank you. John?
Not much. Today, the Planning Commission continued to work on planned residential development regulations and also taking on building height definitions, and that'll be making its way to the council early next year after we have some public hearings. And still just working on a lot of project review in the building and planning department, but nothing out of the ordinary at the moment.
Okay, thank you, John, and congratulations. I got the letter from the Association of Floodplain Managers, and you are now certified, so thanks for taking on that role, because it's valuable to have somebody like that. Mark?
The Transportation Improvement Board met last Thursday and Friday. Unfortunately, they didn't select either one of our projects, so Fruitdale is not funded for next year. I haven't received their rankings yet to see where we were at in the process, but what appears to have happened is they funded a rather unusually large project in our region in Port Orchard. It was an $8 million project. It was actually the largest project awarded in the state, but it's highly unusual for our region to have one that large, and so best I can tell, it was a project that had been on the boards and had been applied for a number of times. Its time had just come, and so it took precedence over the other projects. So we have a good project, and we'll take it again to them in August of next year. We also had the State Street for an overlay. We typically have only gotten funded on those every other year, and so we weren't thinking that one was real high priority, but we'll apply on that one again next year, and in the meantime, we'll be looking for other opportunities to fund Fruitdale in particular. It may be with the new administration coming in, there'll be something similar to the Tiger projects they had in the past, and we have a couple of projects that I'll be bringing to your attention, including Fruitdale, and another one, the John Liner Jones Trail Road Corridor project that we'll be trying to get ready for a program if it does come forward. So other than that, we're just in design mode and getting things finished up for the year and getting ready for the next season.
Thank you, Mark. And we've been winning on these TIB things for so long, we kind of feel entitled to it. So I guess this is reality. What most people deal with is they don't get picked every year.
Well,
so I'm just happy for all the success we've had in the recent past.
Yeah, of course, I was on TIB board for 8 years, and it was unusual to see projects in smaller cities get funded every year. It just didn't really happen. So every other year is even stretching it a bit, but it's a good project, so we'll take it forward again next time.
Thank you. Aaron?
Nothing more to report tonight.
Patsy?
Thank you for passing the budget this evening. In your next council packet, we'll have a copy of the revised ordinance for your information, so you can see how the not passing of the utility tax on domestic water affected the total budget. We will also repost on the website and get copies out of the preliminary budget as changed, but I'm taking a couple days off, so that will be delayed a little bit. It's not going to happen instantaneously. And then also at the next meeting, the final part of the budget calendar for this year, the salary ordinance will be brought before you.
Okay. Thank you, Patsy. So before I go through the council, we will have an executive session here. Aaron, can you tell me the RCW under which that is? That's
No, left that sticky note on my desk, so I'll look it up. It's 5 minutes to discuss collective bargaining. It's a closed session, so there's technically no number necessary, but it's a closed session, and there's no action required. So actually, you can adjourn this meeting, and then we'll have a closed session to talk about collective bargaining and just go home from there.
Okay. Judith?
I want to say thanks for this. It's so cute.
I just wanted to talk about the community dinner that we do every year annually at the Cascade Middle School. It'll be on Thursday at 12:30. I think that's when it usually starts. I don't know when it ends, but it's really fun. I think they're expecting about 200 to 300 as usual. So, yeah. And parking, you'll see some signs probably on Highway 9. And happy Thanksgiving.
Brenda?
Happy Thanksgiving.
Julia?
I want to say that I was not there, but at the Seahawks game, our high school football coach, Dave Ward, his name was put up as one of 2 coaches as Coach of the Week. I thought that was pretty cool and well-deserved. And I also want to mention to the council that I sent out a letter to you regarding the affordable housing. Yeah, I hope you take a look at that. I think that there were some really good things that were brought up, and given that we have our own housing authority here in Sedro-Woolley, maybe it's something that we can look at and apply. But yeah, there was some information there that I hope that you do read. Thank you.
Chuck?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Chief Tucker, the radar gun we got, I wouldn't want to take those numbers to court, because everybody I got 35 miles an hour and then a E. I don't know anything about that thing. What is the E for?
I'd have to take a look at it. It worked fine for me.
Yeah, well,
it was mine. I have to take a look at it, because we actually had something with the electrical connection in the car. Betty couldn't get it to work the other day, but it was something with the connection. So hopefully nothing got fried in it. But I'll take a look at it.
I think it stands for operator error, Chuck.
Yeah, it probably is. But the tuning forks work great. I mean, it clocks them right in. But I just can't imagine everybody doing 35 miles an hour.
No, and sometimes it will pick up your fan on the car.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, and it'll pick up, actually you have to be careful, it'll pick up either your air conditioning fan or your floor heater. So if you have your fan on one speed all the time, and it gives you a weird reading that doesn't make sense, that could be it too.
Well, you can shoot through the windshield or the side window, right? You don't have to have it outside.
Right, yep, you can. But it will pick up the vent fan. It bounces off that fan.
Yeah. Well, it'd be nice to have a little more instruction. Maybe I can have the lady sergeant take me out. And
she ran away. She heard you were coming, and
she did. Well,
she'll be in Spokane when you show up again. So
that's her. Well,
but yeah, we can go over it when you're in again.
It's nice to have a nicer car to ride around in. So thank you for that.
Old Blue's a good old car.
Rick?
Nothing city-wise, but maybe on a personal note. Last Thursday, I got a surprise phone call from my daughter informing us of the early arrival of my granddaughter.
So nice.
She'll be a week tomorrow. So now I might have to learn more about Pete the cat when I start taking them to the library and renew my library card. So she joins my 3.5-month-old grandson. So between the two of them, yes, time in the library will be inevitable. So.
Yeah, Brett?
Nothing, thank you.
Okay, to me, let's see. Chief already talked about the Christmas parade, so hopefully we get good participation there. The tree will be going up, of course, and once again, we'll have the biggest tree in the county, and I get to poke Mount Vernon because they have to ask us to borrow a tree this year, so it won't be as big as ours.
Is that going up?
Yeah. So the Cubs football had a great season. Ellensburg taught us a little lesson out there. Those Ellensburg boys played good ball and won fair and square, but we had a great run, and it's nice to see our boys do so well and go so far once again. This is getting to be an annual event, but Department of Ecology has awarded our wastewater treatment plant once again with Outstanding Wastewater Treatment Plant Award. So I'll go and get the annual photo with our crew down there, and we'll post that so everybody can see it. That's a big, important job. You make a mistake in that, not only do you pollute the river, which nobody wants, but you also subject the city and by extension the taxpayers to thousands and thousands of dollars in fines. So the fact that they keep that up and running and win an annual award, it seems like, which is not easy to do, it's pretty amazing. Lastly, I think this month is Shop Local and Support Small Businesses Month. So let's do that for the holidays. It's a great place to shop, and let's support our local businesses. That's all I have. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I did have one other thing I was going to say.
Oh, yes, go ahead, Judith.
First year ever that I won't be at the parade. It's because I'm going to be at a Messiah sing-along. Sorry.
Well, hallelujah on that. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Motion by Councilman Lindley, seconded by Councilman Kinzer. We stand in adjournment, and we'll go into our closed executive. Thank you all for coming. Have a happy Thanksgiving and a safe drive home.
And for people who are tracking, that's RCW 4230-144.
Thank you, Aaron. I feel better.